Parshas Bshalach, Tafshin Ayin Vav, and it's been a hard week, both here locally and in Eretz Yisrael. And when it seems that it's not so uncommon that we are confronting again, the reality that life is tough and hard to understand how things play out. And there's a lot of people who are enduring a tremendous amount of pain because of harm and damage inflicted upon us and losses we take. Yesterday, I just want to mention, Robi Flegman, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, was really, really a tzaddik, a prince of a human being. And my husband's good friend, and Jenny Felder, Sir Flegman's husband, and Jenny Felder's brother-in-law. I just want to mention something because he was a great person that we had here in our neighborhood. My husband's and a bunch of men, including Robi Flegman, started Yeshiva Katana of Long Island. And there was a board, and everybody was very, very smart, and everybody was a boss of their, top of their field, and lots of, very used to making decisions that everybody else listens to. A lot of strong-minded alpha males running this board of the yeshiva. And Heshi always told me that whenever there was a difference of opinion and everybody was arguing it out, Robi used to listen. He didn't talk that much, but when he opened his mouth and when he stated his point of view, everybody always deferred to him, period. Because his excellence as a human being, his righteousness, his gentleness, his straight thinking, his balance, spoke for itself. He was highly respected, and it's a big loss for our community. And then, of course, in Eretz Yisrael, that terrible stories. And a story up in Passaic with that girl. I happen to be the shadchan for the parents of that girl. The story in whatever, the other story with where was it? The other story.
The girl from Honduras.
Yeah, that girl who was in Honduras, and the woman who was hit by a car and her child was nifter. Whatever. This was a really hard week. And so what we're going to speak about here is the topic of what do you do when it's so hard? What do you do? So here, let's turn to Perek Yudalid, Pasuk Yud in Parshas Bshalach. This is the moment that the Jewish people's high tension moment. The Jewish people are standing in front of the sea. It might not necessarily, by the way, be the ocean. It could be that it was. There's many suggestions of where this happened. It wasn't necessarily the Mediterranean Ocean, but it was a body of water that was big enough that it wasn't crossable naturally. And the Jewish people are standing there, and there's nowhere to go, and they're in between some type of mountain pass with mountains on both sides. And guess who's charging at them from behind? So what happens? Look at the pasuk Yud. Uparo hikriv, and Paro got closer, right there. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael seinehem, and the Jewish people picked up their eyes. V'hinei Mitzrayim nosea achareihem. The whole of Egypt, practically, was traveling after them. Vayiru ma'od, they became terribly afraid. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem, and they cried out to God. Now, a couple of things here. Number one, they picked up their eyes and they saw that Mitzrayim nosea achareihem, Mitzrayim is traveling after them. But it also says uparo hikriv. What's the difference? Paro got closer, they lifted their eyes, and they saw Mitzrayim is traveling after them. It's both are saying something different. So first of all, number one, this is not the main subject of our talk, but it's important to remember that the Geula does not go in order, okay? And therefore we shouldn't be disheartened, and we've mentioned this before, when it doesn't go in order in our lives either. You would think that when Hashem speaks to Paro through Moshe, threatening him, and then starting the Makos, you would think that it would get good, and then better, and then best. And it looks like, after a false start in the beginning, and remember that with the Moshe came, and then Paro made it worse. Remember, we talked about why that. But then it started in earnest. You have the Makkos start, piling up one on the other, and things look like they're progressing. And then finally Paro says to get out of here, and then they all leave. And then they're free. And then suddenly they're wandering, and they're walking in circles. And then suddenly they're ending up right here at the Yam, and their worst nightmare, they're not free. They are absolutely trapped. This is the worst predicament they ever were in, because the entire nation is trapped like one large sitting duck. And it wasn't this bad in Mitzrayim, where they were spread out, living in Goshen. Some people could have escaped or hidden if the Mitzrayim would have come. Here, they're just completely exposed. So everything is like nothing was accomplished. Actually, forget about accomplished. This is the ultimate double cross. This is the worst case scenario. So then they see Paro is getting closer. He's close. He's right there. And then it says Vayisu eseneim. They pick up their eyes, and Mitzrayim is traveling after them, which means to say they haven't escaped Mitzrayim at all. They're right on their tails, and they're both traveling together, so to speak, in the same direction. They're stuck with them. They're as if they can't separate themselves from Mitzrayim. This is maybe their fate. Now remember that when Hashem splits the sea, okay? Remember this. The splitting of the sea does not constitute the salvation of the Jewish people, because the Mitzrayim run right into the sea after the Jewish people, with charging after them, just trying to destroy them. The splitting of the sea served the purpose of proving that Hashem can interfere with nature and do whatever he wants. It proved Ani Hashem. It didn't save the Jews. What saved the Jews is when Hashem got finished proving Ani Hashem, then he let the water collapse back down over the Egyptians, and that saved the Jews. When the miracle was over and the mission accomplished, then Hashem saved the Jewish people. So the Jewish people were used to put in a situation to allow Hashem to prove Ani Hashem. Okay, Hashem was using us, baiting the Egyptians to the Yam to prove Ani Hashem. And when he finished proving his point, he drowned the Egyptians, and that was the salvation. Okay? So here the Jewish people are standing there, like we said, nothing makes sense. Their hopes are dashed. They know that Hashem has done so many nisim already, so they're not sure what to think right now. And they're certainly not unsure that Hashem can save them. Hashem has proven that he can save them. So they see Mitzrayim. They don't fully put the picture together, what's supposed to be happening here. And their reaction is Vayiru ma'od. They became extremely afraid. Vayitzaku b'nei Israel el Hashem. And they started calling out to Hashem. The question here is, it might sound like an odd question, what were they afraid of? They knew Hashem could do nisim. They knew Hashem works in mysterious ways. They already knew that time wasn't an issue for Hashem. But just because the Egyptians were behind them and it looked like 5 more minutes, Hashem could do anything at the last second. What really was the core fear here? Okay, that's the question. So Rashi tries to answer it. Vayitzaku, they cried out. Funny, next 3 words are not the words you would expect to hear. What would you think they cried out for? What's the normal assumption? They're terrified.
To forgive them for whatever much they have done.
Right, and it's setting it up that this was like a reaction to the Egyptians, right? Terror, fear, save us, do something, we know you can, do something. If you think they were thinking, are we not deserving of it? But Hashem had brought them here. What was he intending to do? Kill them all? The odds were that he was going to get them, save them. So what were they so afraid of? So look what it says. They were screaming in fear. They were crying out in fear. Pshat would be, they're scared they're going to die. But deeper thinking says that can't be the whole thing. It can't be, because they had too much other things to take into consideration. Like we said, Hashem brought them all the way here. Was he really going to do them in now? Hashem could do anything. Okay, so what does Rashi say? Tafsu umnas avosam. This is like one of those answers that are more confusing than the question. Tafsu umnas avosam. So they went and they tafas, they grabbed onto, okay, they kind of achieved, they aspired to do something, and they accomplished it. Tafsu umnas avosam, the skill of their ancestors. They reached out, they stretched themselves to do something great that was considered one of the great achievements of their avos, and they did it. What would that be? Prayer. They prayed. Tafsu umnas avosam. They prayed. This makes no sense. This is an achievement. This is a gut reaction, right? Ubavram hu omer. And regarding Avram, it says in Vayera, Perek Yud Tes Chav Zayin, we're learning from my grandfather by Rav Schwab. El hamakom asher amad sham. Rashi is saying this, like Avraham, where it says that he went to the place that he stood. El hamakom asher amad sham, referring to a prayer of Avraham when he prayed for Sodom. Uba Yitzchak, and Yitzchak it says, Lasuach basada, he prayed in the field. That's when he came, right before he met Eliezer and Rivka. Uba Yaakov, and Yaakov it says, Vayifka b'makom, he happened upon the place. That was where he prayed before he left Eretz Yisrael to go to Lavan. V'tzarech biur, my grandfather says, this needs explanation. Why is their prayer on the Yam considered as if they achieved something incredible, that they reached the madrega of their avos who prayed? And then it gives 3 examples of the prayers. The prayer of Abraham by Sodom. That was not a prayer out of abject terror that I'm going to be destroyed in 1 second, save me. The prayer of Yitzchak, Lasuach Basada, was not a prayer, save me, I'm doomed. The prayer of Yaakov when he was preparing to leave Eretz Yisrael, that wasn't a prayer like somebody's going to kill me, save me. There's no connection between their prayer and the prayer of the Avos, seemingly. And again, their prayer on a simple level is just a gut reaction. It's not an incredible achievement. So what's really going on here? Does this question make sense? These questions? Okay. So my grandfather says there's another problem here. Okay? He adds another aspect to the problem. And the aspect to the problem is that there is a Rashbam on a Gemara. The Gemara says, and you'll be familiar with another Gemara that says something like this. The Gemara says that Kashin mizunosav shel adam kekriyas yamsav. The parnasa of a person is as koshe, difficult, like kriyas yamsav. Where else do we know the Gemara saying similar type of thing? Koshe zivugin shel adam kekriyas yamsav. That's on Daf Beis and Sota. Kasha zivugin shel adam. The zivugim are like kriyas yamsav. First of all, we're going to get to what's hard for Hashem. But we're talking about zivugim and parnasa are hard. Kasha, and the Rashbam says the following. He says that a person has to cry out to Hashem for their parnasa, like the Jewish people cried out at the Yam Suf, because it's such a big nace that it needs rachmanas. So, to make the question harder, the tefillah at the Yam Suf was one that was needed, that was a big nace was about to happen, and therefore the Jewish people needed rachmanas, and when you need rachmanas for something spectacular to happen, you need to cry out. Now that seems normal, they needed rachmanas, the Egyptians are coming, but mizonosav shel adam, a person's parnasa, is a big, huge nace more than other things, that you have to cry out for mercy. What's the parallel? So my grandfather suggests the following, based on something we say in Slichas. We say, Anenu kisha anisa la'avraham avinu bahar hamoria. Answer us in Slichas, like you answered Avraham on Har Hamoria. Does anybody remember any such incident where Avraham prayed out to God with all his heart on Har Hamoria, and God answered him? Does it say such a thing anywhere? No, it doesn't. Where did he pray on Har Moriah?
But he said Hashem Yirei
When he spoke to his son, Hashem Yirei Asebni. But where did he's talking to Yitzchak?
Yeah, but as maybe also a prayer that Hashem show me.
Hashem will show us the Seh, but you're in the right track. What is the only possible prayer Avram could have uttered on Har Moriah anyway? Don't make me do this? I don't think so.
Well, on the contrary, Kamala calls out to him and tells
He wanted to
him,
be
don't do
successful.
it, so he actually wanted to finish.
Correct. He was not saying, don't make me do this. What could have been his prayer?
Give me the strength to do it.
That's right. Exactly. The prayer that we're referring to in Slichas is clearly the only prayer Avraham would have uttered at that moment, which is, give me strength, chizuk, okay, in my Emunah. Strengthen my trust so that I can do this without faltering. Do you know why we go to Tashlach on Rosh Hashanah? It has nothing to do with feeding the fish. And by the way, you should not feed the fish. It's ridiculous. But, sorry, I shouldn't say ridiculous. I'm going to get flack for that. It's that you're not throwing your averas to the fish, okay? What's happening, and anyway, the Yekis didn't throw bread in. But the point is that, what's really going on there? So the reason we go to Tashlach is because by the Akedah, there is a medrash that says that Avram was traveling, and he came upon a river, and the river was raging, and he couldn't cross it. And then he prayed, Hashem, the water is up to my neck, please, I can't cross it. And Hashem made the river subside. There's only one problem with this medrash. There is no river, okay, between Hebron and Yerushalayim. So this is an allegory, according to my grandfather. The river that he came upon, which it says the Satan made himself like a river, that's really what the medrash says. This river that he came to, that he was going to drown in, were his overwhelming feelings of love for his child and his incomprehensibility of understanding what Hashem wanted. And it was drowning him, and he felt like he couldn't go any further. His mind and his heart were rebelling against this. He couldn't push himself anymore. So what did he do? He didn't say, I can't do it. He said, make these waves of compassion for my child subside so I can continue to do this. He asked for chizuk, strength, in his emunah and trusting Hashem, which would give him the strength to overcome his natural feelings. And that's why we go to Tashlach, to a river, because we're saying to Hashem, as Avram overcame his feelings of love to do your will, you should overcome your feelings of, I guess, frustration or disappointment in us, and also give us life and help us continue. Okay? That's really what goes on. So this is the same idea. If Avram davened for anything, he davened for Emunah in the face of something that was incomprehensible, and emotionally and intellectually and psychologically a violation of every single thing that made sense to him. Okay? Now, what did Yitzchak daven for? Because now we're talking about that all these tefillas are really tefillas for Emunah. They're not tefillas, save me, I'm going to die. They're tefillas that I could lose my Emunah right now, so save me. Okay? What was Yitzchak's Emunah? What was he afraid of? And he asked Hashem to give him strength, Emunah. So Yitzchak was up on the Akedah, and then when the Akedah was over, you never hear about him again. It says, Vayashav Avraham el Narav. Avram went back to his lads. You never hear about Yitzchak. Heichan Haya, where was he? So the measure says, Began Eden Haya. It doesn't mean he was dead. It means he was meditating somewhere on a hill in another sphere, disconnected from this world, living an entirely spiritual life because he had already given himself up to God, with zero interest in this world. No connection except the minimal whatever he needed to survive. He didn't want to be drawn back into this world and all of its challenges and traps and pitfalls. He wanted to remain up there free and pure. But he had to come back. He had to come back. And when Eliezer is coming with Rivka, he has to get married, and he has to have children, and he has to be a farmer and produce things, and he has to make an impact in the world, and it's fraught with danger. By the way, Eastern religions are all modeled after Yitzchak. They're all modeled after Yitzchak, but they didn't come back. They have to come back. And that was a Tchias HaMesim when he came back, by the way, with Rivka. Rivka brought him back to life. And he davened for Emunah. That what? What do you think his tefillah was? Exactly, that he should be able to retain his Emunah and his Devekus, his closeness to Hashem, and his purity. and that his will should only be the will to be close to Hashem. It should never be corroded by what goes on in this world. He davened that he should have the chizuk, the strength to stay attached to Hashem, despite what he's going to have to go through. And what do you think Yaakov davened for when he was on Har Moriah heading out to Lavan's house? Exactly, that he should be able to have Emunah despite all the challenges that he's going to face. And he's going to know he's not going to get disheartened and collapse in pain or fear or hopelessness, but as the challenges mount and don't end so fast. He davened for Emunah. All the tefillas of the Avos, the skill of the Avos was to only opt for one thing when we feel overwhelmed, lost, terrified, confused. There's only one reaction to those feelings, and that's a learned skill that the Avos taught us. The thing you do is you daven for Emunah. There's nothing else to do. So you daven for Emunah. You don't flail yourself around or looking for other ways. You try to help yourself to the degree you can. But when everything in front of you and everything on the side of you and everything behind you looks like there's nowhere to go, and all you can do is turn to Hashem, then what you do is you don't scream out in fear and panic, save me. You daven for Emunah. So my grandfather says what Klal Yisrael did here is they were at the Yam, they saw no escape, okay? They knew that Hashem had the power to help them. They didn't make sense that Hashem would bring them here to destroy them, okay? But nevertheless, with all that logic, all those, kind of ideas that should have calmed them down, they felt themselves afraid. That's what my grandfather said. They still felt afraid. They didn't have a moment there, I guess, to sit down and have a meditation session. They became afraid, even though a lot of things could have, they could have thought a lot of thoughts that would have probably calmed them down, but they became afraid. They felt the fear welling up in them, despite the assurances they must have had that Hashem will save them. So what did they do when they felt that? They went and remembered what you're supposed to do when you feel afraid, when everything looks like it's closing in on you. You're supposed to daven for Emunah. Emunah meaning trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that everything has a reason and a place, and that Hashem knows you have strength to endure and be calm, and trust that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what He's doing, and just take whatever next step you need to take, and wait to see what the next step is. And that's the V'yitzaku el Hashem. They started crying. V'yitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. They started crying to Hashem. Now, after the whole thing. Now, the Rashbam says, remember there's Gemara, take it to the next step now, that kasha mizil nosov shel adam kekriyas yamsuf, that a person's parnasses, and we'll add zivugim, are so difficult like kriyas yamsuf, and because they both require a huge nace, and therefore we need mercy to deserve it, in a way, so you need to daven for it. So let's just address this. What exactly is hard for Hashem about zivugim, kriyas yamsuf, and mizonosov shel adam? Okay, it's hard for us. What part is hard for us? What part of kriyas yamsuf was hard for us?
Not knowing what's going to happen and accepting what Hashem was going to do to us to do.
Okay, so on the one hand, we can say that just like when a person is waiting for their parnasa, and it's not coming, and they don't want to resort to gezel, schnorring, or schwindeling, okay? They want to make a decent parnasa, and it's not happening for them, and they're struggling, so it's hard for them. And it's hard, like the Jewish people on Kriyas Yamsuf who are waiting for salvation, so to speak. And in both cases, we said you daven for Emunah. But we're going to add another point here. Maybe it is hard for Hashem, the Kriyas Yamsuf. And maybe it is hard for Hashem to give people parnasa and to make zivugim. What does that mean? Well, we have another usage of the term kosher regarding Hashem. When does Hashem say, this is hard for me? Kasha alai. When does Hashem say that? What does it mean, first of all? What is kasha alai perdascham? What does that mean? It's hard for me, for you to leave. So what does it have to do with? Kasha alai perdascham. So what happens because it's hard? What do we have? We have an extra yantiv. We have an extra day of yantiv, Shmini Atzeres, because after all those days of Sukkot, Hashem says, Kasha alai perdascham. It's hard for me that you're leaving. You're going back to the real world. Let me have one more day yantiv. Take that idea, my grandfather says this, and extend it. This is my grandfather. Doesn't say it here, but he says somewhere else. Says, when a person is in a situation where they know they have no one to turn to besides Hashem, and they're not panicking in total confusion, but they're turning to Hashem with calm and clarity, that there's no one to turn to besides Hashem, and they're davening without any distractions anymore, without any other, like, well, I'll try this, but if it doesn't work, I have 3 other options. There's no more options. They are fully, completely exposed to Hashem. All they want is to feel that Hashem is protecting them and giving them strength to do what's right. There is no closer moment a person gets to Hashem. That's the closest you could get. You're done imagining that you have your own solutions. You're done, kind of doubting. You just know this is it. So a person is davening. This constitutes success in life. A person can get to this madriga. So what would happen if Hashem would fulfill their request? Then they don't have to daven anymore. Okay, thank you. Now I'm good to go. Then what happens? That's what it means. Kasha alai perdascham. When Hashem does a nace for someone and gives them what they're davening for, inevitably they will be a little bit more distant from Hashem. Hashem will lose the intensity of the connection. And that's what it means when he says kasha. It was hard in a way for Hashem to finally split the sea, because he would lose that experience, that moment of total bond between the Jewish people and Hashem, who were asking Hashem, just give us the Emunah, to be strong, to trust you completely without any fear in our hearts. That's where we're at. There's no other options. There's nowhere else to go. This is the only thing we can accomplish, the only thing we want to accomplish. That's it. And it's such a beautiful prayer, and it's the greatest prayer a person can offer, and it gives a person so much peace of mind. And when Hashem grants them their request, then we're on to new things. Now it's time to think about other things. Now it's time to get back to real life. And that's a loss for Hashem. So when a person when a person's in that type of position with shidduchim or with zivugim, yeah, of course, it's a great nace. Hashem is going to do a great nace. Everything is a nace. But they have to remember that it will cause Hashem pain if as soon as they get, well, not literally, right, but from what Hashem wants, but that if as soon as we get what we want, we lose, we get distracted, we move on, that is painful to Hashem, so to speak. And therefore, as we're davening for something, part of the davening needs to be, and when you give me what I'm davening for, I'll stay close. I'll remember and I'll stay close, even though now it's not out of desperation, it's out of appreciation, love. I'll stay close even after you take care of what I'm asking for, right? So, huh?
I think sometimes a nace brings us closer to Hashem.
It should. It's meant to bring us closer, but it can also, once the crisis is averted, you just by definition go back to real life.
But you still appreciate.
Yes.
Davening for Emunah brings you closer. Emunah is bringing you closer to Hashem.
It's true, but it should bring you closer and closer and closer. The risk is that when a person is desperate and they have a Yeshua, it is possible for people to forget that and to kind of like drift off a little bit again. It happens all the time.
Well, you see it here, it says Hamidli ain't far than the 20.
Yeah, right, it happens. People lose the impact, the astonishment, the inspiration does sometimes fade away, and then people say, how did I lose that, it was such a moment, and I wish I could go back to that moment where I felt so, alive, and I can't, it happens.
So when God answers you, why? Why, if he feels that you're going to lose that kept you close to him?
Because in other words, the challenge is to be answered and stay close. It's a risk, but that's our challenge, to be answered and stay close. Not to take it for granted.
But don't you start?
1 second, yeah?
It's like when a father hears from the child, even the adult child, I'm a desperate for it, sure, I'll help you. And then perhaps, depends on relationship, they don't hear from them again for 3 months.
Exactly.
So you hope.
Exactly.
It's the same with
But
father and
don't you
child.
start everything
They never
Shema
forward
Yisrael?
easily.
Don't you start all the asking
We don't-
first,
we don't always-
asserting that Hashem is the
Yes,
one?
but what we're saying is that could be by rote. Deeply in a person's heart, they have to feel, they have to try to hold on to that feeling that they had, at that moment when there was a Yeshua, when they were felt, and not even when there was a Yeshua, when they were in a position that they davened so purely. By the way, to get to a situation where you daven so purely, in itself is a form, in a tremendous experience. So it often comes with challenges. But if it gets you there, you don't regret that it got you there. I'll tell you a story. I was once teaching for Torah Masorah. They have this Wednesday morning lecture series for the women in the city. And every year they do it, and they bring in, every week it's two different teachers. And a lot of people come, and it's going on forever. Anyway, so one year, I did it a bunch of times, but one year I was there, and sitting in the front row is this woman. She's probably 100 or something, I don't know, she was so old. And she had a walker, and she looked like a Yekish lady, they have a certain look. And she was giving me this incredible feedback, she was beaming and nodding and smiling, and she was full of this energy and this light, and I kept thinking, who is this person? So after the shir, she hobbles over to me with a friend, and she says, she started to say something. I said, wait, before you speak, who are you? So the friend says to me, I'll tell you who she is. This is Mrs. So-and-so. She lost her husband and children in the Holocaust. She came back and she remarried. They only had one child. That child was killed accidentally. Then her husband died. She just came out of the hospital this week with some big thing that she had, and she's out of the hospital. And so the lady said to me, so I said, so where does this come from? This glow? So she said to me, I never experienced having absolutely nothing left until now. And when you have nothing left at all, then you're open. You just love Hashem, and it makes me happy. Now, I don't know if that was the most sophisticated explanation, but it's like you create a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. When there's nothing left, no more delusions, a vacuum opens up. David HaMelech says this in Tehillim, Libi halal b'kirbi. My heart is a big, empty vacuum within me. Nature abhors a vacuum. When there's nothing else filling it, when you're done with all your assumptions and your agendas and your expectations and how you see things, your subjectivity, there's just nothing left anymore. You're 100 years old. You've been there, done that. Everything came and went. What fills that vacuum? There's only one thing that floods it into it. And that's the Avas Hashem and trust in Hashem. And then it shined from her. I saw it with my own eyes.
But that only comes to a person that had Emunah in the first place, because otherwise they're filled with sorrow.
Well, that's what we're saying. There is a skill. It's exactly what we're saying, Judy. It's a good point. There is a skill that has to be developed, that has to be worked on and nurtured and cultivated. A skill to daven for Emunah. And then a person is able to do it, able to do it. And then when a person can do it, amazing things seem to happen.
Seems bitachon comes in.
And what is the difference in emunah and bitachon, by the way?
Emunah is believing that this is going to be.
And then bitachon?
Is knowing.
Bitachon, so my grandfather said this, Hine kel yeshuati, eftach v'lo evchat. So emunah, bitachon, and pachad is what he said. Emunah is trusting that Hashem is ne'eman. Ne'eman, trustworthy, that we could trust Hashem. Ne'eman, loyal to us. That gives you bitachon, which is a physical reaction of security. An emotional, psychological, real experience of a sense of security, batuach, which leads you to having no physical pachad. Actually, no physical pachad. Being calm in the face of it. And my grandfather used to give an example of this when they lived in Baltimore in 37 or 38, I don't know when it was, or Elchanan Wasserman from Baranovich came to New York, America to collect money for his yeshiva, which was doomed. And it was that trip that I forgot what year it was, it must have been a little later. And the Nazis captured his town while he was in America.
1940.
It was in a little later. And the Nazis captured Baranovich, I guess where his yeshiva was, while he was here. And he opted, everybody knows, he insisted on going back and going down with the ship with his yeshiva. In fact, he gave us, when they came to kill everybody in the yeshiva, he gave a speech, a 3-paragraph speech, how to dial Kiddush Hashem. Turns out, how to dial Kiddush Hashem. It turns out, 2 amazing things. One person was hiding and was not, of that group who heard that speech was hiding and was not killed by the Nazis. And came out and wrote that 3-paragraph speech down, so we have it. It's in the Sefer of Elchanan Wasserman's Shirim. And he said, he had just come back from America, and he said, we might be karbanos to be mechaper on American Jewry. But, because it was a dismal situation here, totally dismal, right, in this country. But my grandfather says that when Rav Elchanan Wasserman was here, he was staying in my grandparents' house. He slept in my father's bed. And my grandfather took my father in at night to say, I want to show you how a tzaddik sleeps. Now this is when all of this was on his head, okay? When there was so much fear. And he said Rav Elchanan Wasserman was sleeping like this, like a little angelic baby with no worries. And he said, that's Emunah. Yeah.
I just came back from my sister this morning, and I got an email in Avanshput where I have one of my children. They say it was the most dangerous spot, and killing after stabbing. And my daughter and a few of her friends organized an Emunah prayer meeting. And thousands of women came and stood at the summit and davened. That was their reaction.
That's it.
I can't say they're not afraid, but their Emunah is just incredible.
That's
and
right.
Baruch Hashem, while we're there was one incident, and now they're in Tekoa, of course, but
Yeah,
they go on. They go
that's
on
right.
with an Emunah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And Eretz Yisrael is conducive to it. It's an amazing thing. And I want to just add one thing. This is what we're missing, unfortunately, by not being in Eretz Yisrael, certain koach that you get there. I want to mention one thing. Sefer Eov. My grandfather did a beautiful pirush on Eov. Eov, suffered terribly. And if you want to just create a synopsis of the whole Sefer and figure out what was going on here, okay? Eov was in so much emotional, psychological pain for one reason and one reason only, and he keeps reiterating it, and his friends have no understanding of it at all. They're like not even on the same page. Let me tell you what his friends is. Friends had a very simplistic paradigm. God is just. God knows everything that happens. There's reward and punishment. You're suffering. So you sinned and you're being punished because Hashem is just. And if you do tshuva, He'll take away the punishment. Okay? That was it. There was no truth in it at all. Eov did not sin. Hashem attests to that. He was a tzaddik. His Yisurim had nothing to do with schar v'onesh, with reward and punishment. Nothing to do with the kapara. Zero. It had absolutely no connection. There was nothing here about him doing tshuva and getting rid of the Yisurim. He didn't sin at all. So what was and his friends were terrible. They're Rishayim, because they insisted that he must be a sinner. And Hashem calls them Rishayim for this, accusing an innocent person. And the reason they insisted that he must be a sinner is because if he wasn't a sinner, then what are the options? And they didn't want to deal with that. They were cowards. Philosophically, how do you deal with the possibility that Hashem is causing someone to suffer so much and he doesn't deserve it? So they had no moral dilemma. They had an easy peasy 2 + 2 is 4 equation. Hashem is just, you're a sinner, that's why you're getting punished, and that's what it is, and just as soon as you admit your sin, it'll all go away. They had no moral dilemma, no philosophical problems, no Emunah issues, nothing. And when Eov insisted that this was a lot bigger than that, and he had no sin, and therefore there was a theological problem, how does God cause someone to suffer who doesn't deserve it? What do you do with that? How do you answer that? Why doesn't Hashem give me an explanation? They just said, stop talking like that, do tshuva. Okay, so they had no issues. Eov had a real issue. He didn't understand how a person who was completely blameless should suffer so much. Constantly throughout the Sefer, he demands an explanation from Hashem. And he says, I cannot love you unless I understand how you operate. And all the Yisurim of Eov were really for one purpose, which was they were called Yisurim Shel Ahava, which means this. Sometimes Hashem gives a person an opportunity to reach the highest possible madrega, which is that a person allows themselves to, what Avram did, sacrifice, not Yitzchak, but what Avram did and what Hashem wanted from Eov, to sacrifice their need to understand, their mind, on an Akedah, on a Mizbeach, and just sacrifice their need to understand. And when you sacrifice your need to understand, there's only one way left to relate to Hashem, and that's the heart. And open the heart, trust Hashem, and that's it. And give up the need to understand. Because Eov couldn't accomplish this, by the way. The Sefer Eov is about what pitfalls not to fall into when you have these problems. One of the things that you don't do is you don't, like Eov, relentlessly insist on understanding. Okay, you don't. You give it up and you open your heart. So Eov kept saying, because I don't understand, I am in danger of losing my Emunah. He kept saying that to them. Don't you understand this, he would tell them? What am I telling you? I'm telling you that I'm in danger of losing my Emunah and I don't want to lose it, and that's why I'm asking Hashem to explain things to me. That's a mistake. Say it like this. When I don't understand, okay, what Hashem is doing, I have to realize that I'll probably never understand. Just because we don't understand how Hashem conducts the world doesn't mean Hashem doesn't conduct the world. So he said, so holding on to I must understand or I will lose my Emunah is very dangerous. So what do? You say, I don't understand, and then you daven for Emunah. You don't connect the two, understanding and Emunah. You say, I don't understand, put it aside, my brain is helpless right now, it cannot provide me any answers, so I am no longer trying to get the brain to do something it's not capable of doing. I can't do what I'm wanting it to do, so I stop asking it to do that, to give me an answer, and then I turn and daven for Emunah, and open my heart, and it will flow in.
Is that the same as being subservient?
No, it's the same as exposing oneself completely to Hashem's will and letting go, and the ability to develop one's Emunah should not be seen as lack of control. It takes tremendous effort. That's what Rashi's saying. It's a skill that has to be cultivated, to know instinctively, to turn to Hashem in prayers for Emunah, and to stop looking for explanations and rationalizations. It's very hard to do that. Our brain doesn't turn off. Our brain is built to be curious. It's the hardest thing of all to deny our brain what it wants to do, which is understand things. Our brain is the most powerful force in us, and what it wants to do is understand, and to tell the brain, to accept that the brain just can't understand is difficult intellectually to do. It's a tremendous nisayon on a psychological level, an intellectual level. Not every nisayon happens on an emotional level. And that is a skill. So that's what they did. That's what we learned, and that's our talent with Klal Yisrael, and we don't abandon it because it's our lifeline. And so when things like now in personal life and national life, we just go and daven. We trust Hashem that everything will fall into place, and we will be zocha to be part of the geula, to see it, to play a role in it. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and I won't be here next.